Hi, I'm Giancarlo from Miami Heat Beat, and we want to welcome Miami Heat UK to their 50th episode. Listen, we're here. We love Dan. We love Dan Healy over here. We love everything that you guys do at Miami Heat UK. It's cool, and for us who have been in the game for a while, it's great to see new content creators kind of come up and do an amazing job. And Dan specifically, you are not just one of the best doing it right now, but you're also an amazing person. So we support you. We love you. We're excited for what comes next for you guys, and keep killing the game. Keep killing the game. And shout out to you for staying up so late for West Coast games. You're crazy. We barely stay awake.
Hey Daniel, it's Will Manso here from Miami Beach. I'm bringing the beauty of the beach and the sand to you to celebrate your 50th episode. I can't believe you've been bringing UK fans all the Heat information, news, chatter, and great guests all the time for 50 episodes now. So congratulations, I love listening. Keep up the great work on the other side, and hope to see you in Miami here soon. You can head out to the beach, you can enjoy some Heat basketball, but 50 down, 250 more to go of being a great Heat fan.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Alphonse Sidney, a.k.a. Alf954. I am the host of Hangover Time on the Miami Heat Beat Twitch channel. We do a post-game show after every Heat game. Check us out. But I'm here today to wish congratulations to Miami Heat UK for 50 episodes. Great job. That's a tremendous milestone. Keep it going. And to celebrate, I brought my dancing girls. I brought my liquor. There's some illicit drugs in the back, and I might get fired, but it's worth it to wish my boy congratulations on 50 episodes. See you in the next 50.
Hey, everyone. This is David Ramil of Locked On Heat. So grateful for having gotten a chance to know Dan over the last year or so. His podcast has been a fantastic addition to my regular listening lists, and just congratulations on 50th episode for you, Dan. And I'm sure there will be 50 more and 150 more after that, because you've brought in some much needed energy, some new enthusiasm, and of course some great fandom of all things related to the Miami Heat. So congrats again. Looking forward to the next 50 episodes.
You're listening to Heating Up the UK,
a Miami Heat UK-based podcast, bringing you the best Heat media guests every single week.
Here's your host, Dan Healy.
Brought to you by the Miami Heat UK social media network. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to episode 50 of Heating Up the UK, a Miami Heat UK-based podcast. I am your host, Dan Healy. Before we come on to today's episode, I have got lots of thanks to give. We've hit a very good milestone there, 50 episodes. Can't believe it. First of all, thank you to the guys that you just heard previous to coming on here. Will Manso, Giancarlo Navas, Alphonse Sidney, David Ramil, four of my favourite content providers in what is an incredible and growing community here for the Miami Heat. I'm very proud to be a part of it. I feel blessed to have spoken to some incredible people: Eric Reed, Jason Jackson, Ethan Skolnick, Mike Inglis. The list goes on. I'm just a fan from the UK. I never thought I would be able to get to talk to these people and share insights and so on. So it is a privilege. So I want to thank all the guys that have jumped on and supported this podcast. It does mean the world. And of course, I've got to say thank you to the listeners, because without you, it's just me and a couple of other guys just talking to each other. So the fact that the numbers continue to grow, it shows that people want to listen to us. And even though we're never really going to be as high as a volume count as the absolute leaders in this market, and why would we? Because they do such an incredible job. But even so, the fact that guys continue to tune in episode after episode is huge and very touching. So thank you so much to the listeners. On to today's episode, and I have my usual two guys here from the UK back, Darren Carter and Sam Aquara. Firstly, Darren, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, mate.
Good. And Sam, how are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing great.
Great
Happy to
stuff.
be on the 50th episode.
Yes. So before we go any further, let me just thank you both you two personally as well, because you've both given up a lot of time. You've probably been on, I would say, up to a dozen episodes each, sharing your insights, sharing your passion for the team that we love. So I really, really do appreciate your time. The UK basketball, NBA in the UK is not huge by any means. It is certainly growing, but it's not it's completely shadowed by football and rugby and cricket, tennis, Formula One. You'd say all of these are probably ahead of this sport, but so to find two guys that are so passionate and are so insightful and knowledgeable about the Miami Heat from the UK is brilliant. So I love talking to you guys. So thank you so much for joining me on almost a weekly basis now. It's fantastic. Anyway, guys, enough gushing. Let's get on to some basketball talk. We have just, as we record now, we have just we've just finished, not quite finished, but we've just had our double header back-to-back against the Phoenix Suns and the Denver Nuggets. Both ended up in losses. I'm not surprised at that. I called it. I think most of us called it. You could have called the Denver game a scheduled loss, a week ago, 2 weeks ago even. This isn't a surprise. But what upsets me a bit is the manner of the defeats again, because we've spoke about it before. We'll probably speak about it again before the season's out. But this team looks so good, so goddamn good when it's winning. But it looks like a lottery team when we're losing. It's so bizarre. I don't know how we can go from a team that looked like we could challenge for not only coming out of the East, but could challenge to win this. And then on other weeks, other games just look so out of form, so out of sorts. Last night's games, as I said, was a bit of a deja vu of the Suns game. Started off hot and then went wrong very quickly. Sam, what are your thoughts here? I mean, what can you put this down to one thing? I've got some notes here. I've got some thoughts of why I think it is. But what's your thoughts, buddy? What's going wrong here? Why are we so inconsistent?
I think for me, the best way to describe this team is we are a good team. Let's get that out of the way. But we've got such a slim margin of error. We can't expect to mess up on a few areas and escape with a win. Watching the Suns game, I was quite disappointed because prior to going into that game, the one thing I praised about the Heat was our ability to switch on defense and making the right switches as well. I praised the team's defensive tenacity on and on and on again, but I felt completely let down after the Suns game. There were instances where the double screens that the Suns kept putting on us, our players got lost on those screens. There was like poor closeouts, poor helping, and if the Suns weren't catching us out on the screens, they were either simply just making shots because they're that offensively talented. And if they weren't making shots, they're out rebounding us. So it was quite a disappointing defensive show for me to watch. And on the offensive end, there wasn't much there, but we kind of tend to expect that from previous games.
Yeah, and this is the bizarre thing, Sam. I'm glad you sort of led that on because, Darren, this team, Sam's just sort of said there, you come to expect now that the Heat aren't a good offensive team. But I don't get why, because last year we lost. There could be some, all these fingers being pointed about why we would maybe become a worse defensive team, losing Jay Crowder, Derrick Jones Jr., getting in Avery Bradley and Mo Harkless. Avery Bradley didn't really play because of injuries. Mo Harkless didn't really play just because of bad form. So, but defensively, we've got better. We're a top 5 defensive team. But the offense, which was so sharp last year, is fundamentally the same team as what ran us to the finals last year. So what's going on? How can we be so good last year and the same sort of personnel be so shit really this season?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with what Sam's saying. Margin for error is very, very slim. And if we're not, getting that offense and we're not flowing on offense, it puts a lot of pressure on your defense. And as good as I think we are, and as you say, I agree with you, I think we have got better. It's on some nights, if we're not quite at it, it's going to tell. And I think it has done, especially in these last 2 games and against obviously quality and elite opposition. But again, I have another theory, and I base this a lot on obviously my experiences this year in football over here with COVID and restrictions and everything else. And I think that, being within a squad and having to deal with injuries, deal with protocol, and not having fans in arenas as well, all these things that have been thrown, at teams, obviously all across the world. But, in the Heat's case, we have had, a real sort of turbulent time, haven't we, with injuries and players missing games. And I don't know, watching the 2 games, the Suns and last night, that I can't help but feel we get to a point in games where, I feel that, maybe it's a mental thing as well with the players that, do we push ourselves? Do we excel ourselves too much to get back into a game when realistically, if we're looking at it and saying these two, but potentially we're not going to win, do we save ourselves a little bit? And on the back of that, then, I look at, right, can we position ourselves into the playoffs where we want to be? Obviously, missing out on that in play or playing, should I say, tournament. Because I think with this squad, in playoff games, I think that's when we'll be laser focused, and all the things that we're sort of skipping at the moment defensively and offensively, I think we'll be really sort of zeroed in when it comes to playoffs. So I think what I'm trying to get to the point really is that, are we really, all the players sort of planning mentally and physically to get into the playoffs? And that's when we're going to start playing our best basketball. I know that's not, you can't sort of hang your hat on that, and people talk about momentum and everything else, but I'll just get a feel for this squad that they're, let's do enough to get ourselves into the playoffs, and that's when we can really hone in and zero in.
Yeah, I think that's that can't be understated. I think that you're right. This is more of a playoff locked team than it is a regular season team. I think that you can see there's levels that we could step up here if need be, and it can't be understated the points that you make there, which are really very key. The fact that it is a COVID season. I think that you also got to remember that this is at the moment it is a West Coast trip again. We are playing a ridiculous amount of games in a short amount of time. To play 8 games in I think 11 or 12 games, which is what we're currently in the mixture of. It's borderline unfair on the players because we expect the same of them every week, forgetting of the fact that they've got travel, they've got training, they've got coaching, they've got flying from city to city through the nights. So look, I mean that is a great point to put up. But we'll come on to sort of things about the play in and play on, playoffs and so on in a minute. But just coming back to last night's game again, Sam, you sort of touched on it there about soft switching and things. Do you think there's some coaching issues here? Because surely with players like Jokic, we shouldn't be having players like Jokic being guarded by Duncan Robinson shouldn't be guarding him. Kendrick Nunn shouldn't be guarding him. Bam Adebayo should be guarding him, and yet it seems like we're always being switched onto the small guy. What's that to do with? Is that more sort of clever offensive play, or is there a coaching issue there?
You've got a point. I don't want to think that Bam Adebayo's got low defensive IQ, because he's a fantastic defensive player. He should know that there's certain switches he shouldn't make. So I'd like to believe that it's the routine they go through in practice, and it's sort of like embedded in him that when the ball moves this way, you got to switch this way, and it's kind of like an instant response. But I'd like to hope that when that happens once or twice on the court, you've got people calling that out. That's what the assistant coaches are for. That's what Udonis Haslem is for. So you've raised a very good point.
Yeah, exactly. I know you've got to give it some credit to the better players will realise that as well, and they'll force those switches. So it just seems a little bit disjointed at the moment. And just sort of finishing up on the sort of offensive woes. The reason why I sort of bring it up, and it does make me scratch my head, is because when you've got Butler, Bam, Robinson, Dragic, Herro, Nunn, these are all good players that are all capable of hitting 20s, mid-20s, like late teens every night. And we just don't, we seem like we're always relying on Butler to get you majority of the points there every night. And we just don't see it enough from the other guys. It's far too streaky. And these are some of the reasons why I think that we're struggling. And Darren, I know you're a big Tyler Herro fan. But with no Oladipo, who gives you that offensive punch, he's obviously out indefinitely for the time being. We will touch on him in a minute. And Dragic being out of form, looks like he's lost a step, but doesn't play now back-to-backs, which is understandable. But he looks a shadow of the player that we saw last season, especially in the bubble. Tyler Herro last night hit 5 points in about 27 minutes, something like that. He only hit 10 points against Phoenix in about 30-something minutes. When we are missing 2 key offensive threats, which is what Oladipo and Dragic even now are, we rely on Tyler to do much more than that, don't we?
Oh yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. And again, planting my Tyler Herro jersey aside, and I just love the way he plays the game. And but you're right, he hasn't been there or hasn't stepped up when we've needed him recently. But you go on his track record, and he's played in enough big games now where he's delivered in clutch moments. He's hit enough, clutch shots to know that you can rely on him. And for me, I think it's just a period where probably, again, he's a shooter. And like you say, he's been very streaky of late, as has, Duncan Robinson. But, for me, Tyler Hero, you can hang your hat on him. You can trust him. And I think this will be something he'll come through. And, but it's just unfortunate, like you say, when we're missing Oladipo or Jimmy, needs someone alongside him. Tyler hasn't quite had it in the recent weeks, but for me, I think you trust him. You have to. His track record has proved that.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot more things to be concerned about than Tyler Hero bouncing back and giving you sort of solid offensive performances, because he's got it in his locker. We know he has. He's got such a high skill set. He has improved as a player, maybe not as much as what we perhaps thought that we would have seen this season. He started very good and we've seen it sort of tail off. But you like to think that he's got that in his personality, he's got it in his game, he's got it in his self-belief that he will become that player. Maybe we are asking a bit too much of him. He had an incredible rookie season. He hasn't had a summer off yet. He hasn't had an off season to sort of maybe bulk up and learn a bit more about the game. He's gone literally from one season straight into the next. So, but I'm not overly concerned, because, as I said, this isn't a player you'd think that would ever sort of, you'd worry about. He hasn't got that in his locker, because he's got that belief to be able to do that. I hope that we can start to rely on it a little bit more, because you need him to be able to become that man if, for example, Dragic is going to, continue this sort of regression, and we're not going to. Whatever the best we can hope for with Dragic is that he just regains some form. But so with that said, and with Oladipo out, you do need to start expecting Tyler to come up with these games to be able to say, okay, I'm going to be the go-to man, which is what we saw last season. So yeah, okay. Just before we finish on last night's games, then Sam. We heard the same sort of story again with Bam Adebayo after the Suns game. And it was the usual quote, I need to be more aggressive. Now, he was more aggressive last night. He took more shots. But I think a lot of the fan base are quite hard on him, but they're hard on him because we know how good this guy can be. He's got to realise that if he goes downhill a bit more, if he runs at the basket, if he attacks these players, he is better than 90% of the guys he's going to be coming up against. The sooner he believes that, he can be a superstar. He's already a star, but you can put that super in front of it. But it just frustrates us, doesn't it, as fans, because we don't see it enough. We keep hearing after defeats, I need to be more aggressive. What do we think here? Do we think that Bam can be the player where he can realistically get mid to high 20s every single game, like Joel Embiid does, like Nikola Jokic does? Because the rest of it is there, isn't he?
Yeah. Just watching those past few games and thinking back to earlier in the season when Jimmy was out with the COVID protocol and Bam was just aggressive, it got me thinking, maybe we need a situation of was it 2012 to be specific, where D-Wade took a step back and said, okay, LeBron, you're the man, take this team to where it needs to be taken to. Maybe we just need Jimmy Butler to just take a step back and say, okay, Bam, this is your team. And he does say it. I remember, I think it was last season or this season where I think Jimmy was asked if he was an all-star, I think it was like there's an all-star on the team, and then he goes, who, Bam? So yeah, he does say it in terms of words, but I think maybe it's time for him to take that sort of step back in a sense of ceremoniously, not in actuality. Obviously, I'd want him to defer to Bam, but I want him to still know that he's there to save the game when we need him to, like D-Wade would do. He always kept that sort of reserve power in case LeBron wasn't getting it done. So yeah, it could be a case where the coaching staff, the team as a whole, and everyone just says, all right, Bam, take us to the finish line, and he needs to believe it himself and just get it done.
Yeah, I think that's mainly it, because we've seen the improvement in his mid-range. I mean, from last season to this season, it's incredible. That he's knocking down over 50% of his mid-range attempts, which is great, because it was nowhere to be seen last year. That's great, but he is so athletic, he is so powerful that if he goes downhill, nobody is stopping him, and we don't see it enough. And that's what I think that's what us fans get more frustrated at, is because he knows what he's got to do, because he says what he's got to do, but we don't see it enough. And that's the frustration at the moment we've got with Bam. But I hope he can believe it. Again, perhaps it is something down to the short turnaround time. He worked on an aspect of his game and he's got better at that game. But he is a star waiting to become a superstar. He just needs to believe in himself a bit more. I think it's as simple as that. Okay, right. Let's get on to the next game, which is against Minnesota. Now, that wraps up the West Coast trip. I think personally, Darren, 2-2 was always the sort of realistic achievement here, the record here going through this. I said the Portland game was always the biggest one because that was one that could go either way. Very talented team with very talented players. That's the one we needed to get the win. And not only did we get the win, but we played really well. Again, just shows how bipolar this team is. Suns and the Denver game. Look, I think you would have been maybe you would have not shocked, maybe that's the wrong word, but I think that there would have been eyebrows raised if we would have won either one of those games, because the Suns are the hottest team in the NBA right now. I know Clippers are on a bigger winning streak, but the Suns have won, oh God, no, I think they've only dropped one in about their last 12, 13 games. So they're looking great. We said on our live show, Sam, the other day that, they're on paper, you can make an argument that they're one of the best teams, or maybe even the best team in the NBA. So Suns game, I didn't expect anything in. Denver, I don't care where you are, going to Denver is a hard game no matter what. So second night of a back-to-back with injuries, etc., that was always going to be a write-off, I suppose. So Minnesota game has to be a win, Darren, doesn't it? Because if this goes 1-3, I don't want to log on to Twitter.
Yeah, I think you're dead right in everything you've just said there. And I think there is kind of a running joke, isn't there? If you play Denver on a back-to-back, at their place with the altitude and everything else, that it is an automatic loss. But yeah, you're right. The Minnesota game now is a game that we need to go and win. I think that you could probably say that now for the rest of the schedule. I've seen your tweet and obviously looked at our remaining schedule and games, and they are favourable. But I've seen a few comments saying that you do have to go and win them games. So hopefully Friday night against Minnesota can be the benchmark to say, right, these are games that we should go and win. We need to go and win, and then that can sort of propel us then into the must win or the real key games. Your Atlanta game, your two against Boston. I know we've got a few difficult ones against Brooklyn and the Bucks as well, but I think the games we should be winning now. The priority is that get it done. And as I say, them other three, the Atlanta and the two Boston games, I think are ones that we've really got to key in, and they will be the difference then whether we do propel ourselves into the actual playoffs or we get stuck in the playing tournament. Yeah. So it's key, it's vital, that we start Friday with that and have that mindset.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that the one sort of thing that when I was scrolling through, we'll sort of finish the episode with some predictions about that upcoming run that we've got, the next 6 games, which I think are all very winnable. But one thing when I was looking through the sort of immediate games is that after the Timberwolves game tomorrow, we only actually go out west once more in the remaining 16 games after that, and that's against the San Antonio Spurs. We play Western teams, but we don't have any more travelling really. It's all Eastern Coast after that Spurs game, which is in about a week's time. So that's important. I think that's something that will favour us. According to Tankathon, and I know there's all sorts of different strength of schedule variation sites out there, but according to Tankathon, who do it most logically, in my opinion, which is obviously just down to record, they say we've got the third most easiest schedule coming up. So again, these are positive things because the East is just a clusterfuck at the moment. It's crazy how we can be 2 games below 4th, but only 1.5 games ahead of 9th. We'll come on to all that in a second about the playoff play-ins and how that will work and all the rest of it. But yeah, again, Sam, this is a game that there is no excuses really, is it? I think they've got the worst record off the top of my head. I believe it's the worst record in the NBA. 2-2, as we said. I think you was maybe a little bit more optimistic. I think you went 3-1 over this West Coast trip, which doesn't surprise me because that's very you. That's very you. But this one has to be. I mean, God, we do not want to wake up Saturday morning with a defeat here, do we?
Absolutely not. I didn't even want to wake up this morning. I haven't even watched any of my usual Heat pods because it hit me that bad. But yeah, it's a must-win game. I mean, we've seen this team go through good stretches where we can't lose a game and then stretches where we can't win a game. So I want to think it's just the ebbs and flows of the season. Hopefully we can get a nice win streak coming soon, considering the East Coast, Major League East Coast sort of, I think an 8-game streak we've gotten. There should be all winnable games. So hopefully we could start that from here.
Yeah, I think that it is key. Not only do we pick up a win, but after a little bit of criticism, I think it needs to be a convincing win. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Absolutely.
You have to you take any W, of course you do. You can't just rock up to any team in the NBA and expect to win. That's not how it works. So we have to put a shift in, and we'll have to get that win. But we need this to be a good one because. Yeah, we don't want to be coming back here looking at some of the teams that we got to play. I mean, straight after that game, we then got Brooklyn Nets. You know, I know that they have maybe got players missing right now, but that could easily end up in a defeat as well. And suddenly, yeah, those play-in tournaments start to look maybe like it could fall that way, which would be a bit of a nightmare. We'll come on to that in a second anyway. But let's just, before we go through the schedule, I just want to touch again on where we believe this team is, because as I said before, we look either very good or we look very, very average. Personally, I think this is a worse team than it was last year. I don't think that's unreasonable to say. I think we've seen improvements in certain areas, but overall, I think this is a pretty average team, and I'm surprised by that because I predicted Miami to finish second in the East this year before a ball was bounced, and it's not going to be anything like that. We've seen the top 2, top 3 sort of storm ahead of the rest of the pack, but I am surprised at some of the regression here. We touched already, Darren, on Goran Dragic. He is on a 19 million team option for next year. I don't see any way, shape, or form. Take loyalty out of it for a minute. The Heat would be mad to do this, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I think when you look at it from a business standpoint and you take loyalty and what Goran's done for the franchise, I just think, there's too much risk with injury and sort of, he's missed a fair few games this season and previous, seasons. Obviously, he's aged. The skill set is obviously still there. He still shows the flashes of what he's all about. So yeah, I think that one is definitely you from a business standpoint. You wouldn't take him up on that. I think from what you're saying about where we stand, I mean, I'm a little bit more optimistic. And again, I take into all the factors this year in terms of the shortened rest that we had after the finals, from a conditioning standpoint for the players, and just what I've seen recently with the mindset that, I think it is. And from my aspect as a fan, I just want us to do enough. I wouldn't want us to excel ourselves just purely on the basis that we haven't had as much rest as anyone else. We've had injuries. We've had to rely heavily on certain players. So all that sort of workload and physicality that they've had to lay out there, and mentally as well, I think we're saving a little bit. And for me personally, I take that because then when we enter the playoffs, we've got more than enough experience, more than enough talent to go into series and win them. So yeah, I kind of like where we're at in terms of the roster and the players we've got, because I think in big playoff games we will have players that will step up big and have the experience. So there you go, Mr. Optimistic.
Darren Carter, everyone. See, there's me just pouring doom and gloom. This is what this is what staying up to 3 a.m. 3 nights out of 4 does to you. It makes you moody. It makes you cranky. So Darren Carter, thank you very much for just saying settle down a minute. This is a good team and we are prepared for the playoffs. So thank you very much for that, Darren. Sam, I'm going to bring straight back to negatives and say, look, there are reasons for this, as we've touched on them. Goran Dragic was incredible in the bubble, and we haven't seen anything like that. Mainly because, just age, lost a step. He got a serious injury in the finals with his plantar fascia, or however you pronounce it, injury. So that was expected that we wasn't maybe going to see that sort of same level of performance come. The short layoff, as Darren's just touched on there, that is a point. We haven't. Some of the teams here, by the time this season resumed, hadn't played for the best part of a year. And then suddenly, we was coming in and after about a 10-week layoff and expected to pick it all back up. So again, that's a good point. Tyler Herro, we've mentioned it, maybe hasn't improved as much as we perhaps hoped he would have done. And that's not really a slant on him because, as we've already said, there's reasons for it. Again, he hasn't had an off season and so on. Jimmy Butler, our all-star, our superstar, he's been affected with injuries as well. But if you had to pinpoint this as the one main reason, what do you put this down to? The fact that this just isn't as good a team as it was last year?
I want to say something, and I don't want to backtrack, but I feel like it needs to be said. And it's just piggybacking on what Darren said initially at the start of the pod. At some point, we have to ask ourselves, is this a mental thing? Because thinking back to the trade deadline, we saw leading up to the trade deadline how Duncan Robinson played, how Tyler Herro played, and then as soon as that was out the way, they started playing fine. And I want to liken this team to, I believe it's the 93 Phoenix Suns, the Suns that made it to the finals. Charles Barkley always said they made it to the finals, and then the next year, everyone came in thinking they're champions, like they won a ring. And last season, we always had those stories of 3 a.m. practices and how these teams were dogs. But I don't know, maybe because of like COVID protocol or just shorter off season, we haven't really had those stories. And I feel we've lost that underdog sort of feel that we had last season. So that's what I want to attribute it to.
Okay, yeah, maybe there's the points there. I mean, I'm not sure because I think that everything that the Heat culture goes for would suggest otherwise. But you're saying what you feel, and that's there is a point to that because you're right. We were the underdogs last year, and suddenly there were people that saying that they didn't want that fluke, as everyone was calling it a fluke. They wanted to replicate that. So, and we haven't really seen it. So maybe there is some substance there, Sam. Before we come on to sort of as we said, there's some predictions about the next half a dozen games. I just want to touch on a segment here about offensively again. If we look at this team, if we think that we've got Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, who are 2 very good two-way players, obviously undoubtedly superstars in this league. If you take them aside for 1 minute, Victor Oladipo, that we hope, from what we have with some intel, that he will play again this season. So we've got this sort of no risk, suck it and see, have a little look, see what he is, see what he's about, etc. But I think maybe the plan would be that we do re-sign him. It just becomes on what number we re-sign him to. But let's say, for example, that all works well, the injury isn't too bad, and Oladipo is a Miami Heat player next year. That's 3 pretty good offensive players. Dragic, you would say, would probably not be there, or if he is there, certainly not for the money that he's on, unless they can renegotiate something, a team-friendly deal. Tyler Herro is locked in still for another couple of years, I think, on his rookie deal. Apart from that, I think Precious Achiuwa is the only player that is guaranteed to be back here after next year. Everybody else is on team options or are expiring contracts. Now, we've spoken many times about Duncan Robinson, about whether you pay him. I think at this stage, you do. I think you almost have to now. Because if you don't pick Duncan Robinson in, Tyler Herro with an off season, we expect to progress. Jimmy, Bam, and Vic, that's fine. But when you look at the free agency class, apart from Chris Paul, who's on a player option, you would expect him to be in Phoenix next year. Kawhi Leonard, I know there's been some rumors, but he's on a player option. You expect him to be in LA next year. After that, nothing jumps off the page here. So, what do you think, Darren? Do you think that you're relying on maybe now getting Vic to health and getting him in, getting Duncan signed up, because the pros and cons here of whether you do or not are sort of becoming a non-factor now? I think you have to, and then hoping that Tyler improves, because otherwise, where's your points going to come from next year?
Yeah, and personally, I'll be quite happy, with that 5 that you mentioned there. Oladipo, obviously, getting him back fully healthy, Bam, Jimmy, Tyler, and then if you throw Duncan Robinson in there, I'll be quite happy with that as the starting blocks, if you like, and what you're building the team around. Like you say, I mean, I'd have to have a look at the full list of free agency, but
well, I've got a few. I've got a few for you. So the standard names. So Kyle Lowry, as we knew, we was obviously very much in for him. He was always going to be an expiring, so that may resurface. And again, I'll be well up for that because I'm a big Kyle fan. DeMar DeRozan, that's another name that's, again, he's not a two-way player by any means because defensively he's garbage, but offensively he's still borderline all-star level. Then you've got Lonzo Ball, which is another name that clearly there's rumours that he wants out. Not necessarily that scorer that you want, but the facilitation and the playmaking and the IQ is up there. So out of those three names, that's really pretty much it. Otherwise, you're rolling it back and you're going again.
Yeah, and like you say, the three, I mean, probably the most solid one out of them is Kyle Lowry. I think Lonzo is more of your Maverick type one. I mean, I'm a massive DeMar DeRozan fan anyway, and I get your point on him defensively. I just think he's that kind of guy. Him and Lowry are definitely sort of heat guys. Probably DeRozan a little bit more, I'd say. I think he'd be a nice fit. But yeah, like you say, if there's not much out there in terms of what we can go and get, then yeah, like you say, the Robinson factor certainly leans heavily towards re-signing him and getting him, sort of penned down on a deal. But yeah, like I say, that's not a bad five for me to be building around. And then it's up to Pat, and in Pat we trust, and we always have, to go and build a team to accompany the five. Going to be the foundation.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, obviously, look, people sometimes criticise the plan to not re-sign players and so on, and you was hoping on a player that with Giannis Antetokounmpo that you was hoping on someone that never really gave a true indication that actually wanted to be here. But I don't blame them at all for that, because if a superstar generational player comes about and you think there is a chance, you don't scupper that by signing up B+ players to give you a bit more depth and maybe do a bit more job. You always leave that max slot available to try and get that superstar. So I don't blame them. But, here we are. Because of it, there is a consequence. And here we are that everybody now is starting to get signed up, and therefore the list doesn't look as great. But as Darren said there, you do trust in the front office. They're savvy enough to be able to put together a good team. Trevor Ariza's been fantastic, Sam. They're much better than what we thought. This is the guy who hadn't played for a year. So I think hats off to him. He's become not only quite a good offensive threat, but defensively has been great as well. And I think to come in as a starter after so long has been hats off to him for that. But also we saw a little glimpse of Dwayne Dedman last night. We saw 6 minutes of him. He was our second highest rebounder. He got the same amount of points as I think Hero, was it? Or no, maybe not. And I think he got a block as well. So Dwayne Dedman, that's going to help us, I think, a bit off the balls, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The small sample size of minutes that we saw, it gave me a bit of hope, and I just hope that Eric Spoelstra will find a way to factor in a few more minutes, because in the last game we needed a lot more than the few minutes he played.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so the sort of point I was getting to that is that you do trust in this front office to be able to put together some players, because Miami is always going to be one of the most attractive propositions. So to bring in players at this stage, even when some of the bigger names went, we brought in Trevor Ariza. He's come in and done such a great job, much better than what I think everybody had expectations of him from both inside and outside the club. And then, as I said, the early stages, very, very small sample size, as you said there, but the early stages of Dedman, hats off, thumbs up to that. So, right, guys, we will finish up with a segment just about looking at the schedule going forward. So we've already said here the Timberwolves, wow, I mean, has to be a win. But after that, as I said, Brooklyn Nets in an early game, on Sunday. That could go either way, because we don't know what's happening with their personnel at the moment. They seem to have a lot of players out, but you'd like to think that we give them a game regardless. Then just looking forward, we've got Houston, San Antonio, Atlanta, and the Bulls. Now, the second two especially, you say, are must win here, Darren. But overall, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games there. What do we think? I mean, we've got to be looking really at least 4 of them, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, sort of, closing out this month, I think you look at, obviously, the Brooklyn game is the one that, you put a highlight round, and, you're not probably expecting much, but then again, Brooklyn have shown on a couple of occasions now that they can be a little bit lax. As I said, the Atlanta game is big. I think that's the one that decides the tiebreaker as well, doesn't it?
Okay. Yep.
So I think, as it stands, we're 1-1, as my researchers hopefully shown. But yeah, and then the 2 back-to-back Bulls games and Spurs. So yeah, I mean, I only really look at the Brooklyn and Atlanta games as the ones that I'll say I'm 50-50 on. The rest I do fancy us, going and winning.
Yeah, it seems like a really sort of important week to 10 days of the season now, because we finished quite strong. I think we've got Bucks are in there and Boston once or maybe even twice. So there's some tough games to finish the season. So this next few games here look like the what could make or break this lock for a top 6 seed, which will get you in the playoffs. Because if you start falling into those play-ins, or at the 7 and 8, you get 2 bites of the cherries. But I don't want to be in that 7th or 8th spot and having to play possibly a Raptors. Maybe they're only a game outside, or Charlotte, who looked so good just a week or so ago, with players like Gordon and Gordon Hayward and Devonta Graham and so on. They can.
They've got Rozier back as well.
Yeah, Rozier back. I don't want to be falling into that, because they're elimination games. If you lose them, you're done. The season's finished. So, Sam, finish us off here. As I say, this is a turning point in the season. The next week or so.
Yeah, and I think between now and the playoffs, we have to absolutely try to widen that margin for error, because like you said, if we happen to fall into the play-in games, all we need is one off night on defense, one night where we can't rebound, one night where our switches are terrible, and that's the end of our season. So from between now to the end of the season, we have to actually start working on just those little bits of areas of concern that we all know are areas of concern.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't want very quickly, for people that don't know about the play-in tournament, top 6 are locked in. 7 then plays 8, 9 plays 10. The winner of the 9 and 10 game goes to play let's start again. These 7 and 8 teams, the winner of that one are in the playoffs. The loser of that game will play the winner of the 9 and 10, and the loser of the 9 and 10 are out. So that will work out your seedings. I don't want any part of that. So let's hope that we can get this next stage. This is a crucial stage of the season. It's a really, really strange time, because at this moment in time, as I've said, I don't know whether this team is good or not. Darren has said that they are. Darren says we're locked in for the playoffs and we will become good then. I will agree with you, Darren. You're swaying me. I'm maybe a bit too down about it, but we'll see what happens. But without a doubt, by the time we next talk, guys, which will be maybe in a week or two's time, we'll know a lot more about the picture here. So let's see what happens. Guys, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, as I said, to being a part of this team. A quick shout out to John Jablonka and Danny Ronaldo as well for being part of my stream team, as are you, Sam, giving up all your time here on almost a nightly basis to be able to come and support this podcast and this account in general. It means so much. Thank you so much for joining me. We will continue going, guys. 50 episodes are in the books. We are just getting started. We will continue to be here for as long as you'll have us. Thank you again to all the listeners, all the people that have helped grow this account. It means so much. So, guys, enjoy the next couple of games. We'll catch up again next week. We'll leave it there tonight. And as I said, a big moment coming up in the season. Let's hope by the time we come in, we've sort of solidified that top 6, because that's all I want. All right, guys, take care.
You've been listening to Heating Up the UK.
Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts to ensure you never miss a show.
Also, go give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook by finding our page at the Miami Heat UK. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, Miami Heat UK TV, for our latest shows and fun content.
That's your Miami Heat from across the pond covered. Thanks for listening.